Imagine waking up in ancient Rome, the greatest city on earth, home to nearly 1 million people, the center of an empire stretching across 3 continents. Marble temples tower above crowded streets, merchants shout from every corner, and soldiers march beneath triumphal arches. To an outsider, Rome appears wealthy, powerful, and orderly. But before you leave your apartment that morning, there is one thing you must remember. Check your money pouch, check your door, check your belongings. Because in ancient Rome, losing your property was not a possibility, it was an expectation. The average Roman did not begin the day by thinking about breakfast. He thought about security. Before stepping outside, many citizens carefully tied leather purses beneath their clothing. Coins were often hidden inside belts, sewn into garments, or carried in concealed pouches. Walking through Rome with visible money was an invitation. Pickpockets watched crowded streets the way hunters watched prey. A moment of distraction could cost a laborer an entire week's wages, and most victims would never see their money again. The streets themselves created perfect conditions for theft. Rome was loud, crowded, and chaotic. Vendors pushed carts through narrow roads. Donkeys carried supplies between buildings. Water sellers shouted over fishmongers. Children ran between strangers. In such confusion, a thief could slip through a crowd unnoticed. A hand reached into a pocket, a purse disappeared, and within seconds the criminal melted into a sea of people. By the time the victim noticed, dozens of faces surrounded. One of the most dangerous places in Rome was not a dark alley. It was the marketplace. Every day thousands gathered to buy food, tools, clothing, and household goods. Shoppers focused on bargaining and inspecting merchandise. Meanwhile, thieves focused on shoppers. Professional pickpockets often worked in teams. One created a distraction while another stole valuables. A third carried the stolen goods away. Victims frequently realized they had been robbed only after returning home, long after the criminals had vanished. Even wealthy Romans lived with fear of theft. Rich households displayed expensive furniture, jewelry, silverware, and imported luxuries from across the empire. Such wealth attracted attention. Servants, visitors, laborers, and strangers entered homes every day. Any one of them might notice something valuable. Roman writers often complained about missing possessions. Wealth brought comfort, but it also created new risks. The richer a person became, the more locks, guards, and precautions were needed. For poorer Romans, the danger looked different. Most lived inside crowded apartment buildings known as insulae. These structures packed families into small rooms stacked several stories high. Doors were thin, hallways were shared. Neighbors came and went constantly. Privacy barely existed. If a resident left for work, he worried about what might happen while he was gone. An unlocked room could quickly become an empty room. Even simple possessions carried enormous value to those struggling to survive. Nightfall did not bring safety. In many parts of Rome, darkness made crime easier. Streets lacked modern lighting. Shadows covered alleyways. Criminals knew that witnesses were less likely to identify them after sunset. Travelers hurried home before the city became too dangerous. Those who stayed outside often carried lanterns, but light could attract attention from thieves just as easily as it helped avoid them. In some neighborhoods, darkness belonged to criminals more than honest citizens. Roman law punished theft, but enforcement was inconsistent. The empire had no modern police force patrolling every neighborhood. Victims often had little hope of recovering stolen property. Reporting a crime did not guarantee justice. Courts existed, but legal action could be expensive and time-consuming. Many ordinary people simply accepted their losses. They knew that finding a stolen purse among nearly 1 million residents was almost impossible. Prevention mattered far more than punishment. Because of these realities, Romans developed habits centered on protection. Doors were secured whenever possible. Valuable items were hidden. Money changed locations frequently. Travelers remained suspicious of strangers. Parents warned children to guard possessions carefully. Even trusted friends could become targets of suspicion when valuables disappeared. Over time, caution became part of daily life. Locking something away was not considered paranoia. It was considered common sense. Yet the true story is even stranger than simple street crime. Romans did not lock their belongings only because of pickpockets. They locked them because danger existed everywhere. In apartments, in markets, in taverns, in public baths, even inside their own homes. The city's enormous population created endless opportunities for theft. As Rome grew richer, criminals grew more creative. In the next chapter, we will step inside the homes of ordinary Romans and discover why a locked door was often the only thing standing between a family and disaster. For most Romans, home was not a spacious villa surrounded by gardens. It was a cramped room inside an insula, a towering apartment building packed with hundreds of residents. These structures filled much of the city. Families lived above shops beside strangers and beneath neighbors they barely knew. Everyday people moved through narrow stairways carrying goods, water, tools, and food. With so many unfamiliar faces constantly passing through the building, residents learned an important lesson. If something is not locked away, it might not be there tomorrow. A typical Roman family owned far fewer possessions than a modern household. Yet each item mattered. A cooking pot, a wool blanket, a pair of sandals, a cloak for winter, these were expensive necessities. Replacing them could take weeks or months of wages. To a wealthy Roman, such objects appeared insignificant. To a laborer, they represented survival. When thieves entered apartments, they did not need to steal gold to cause suffering. Taking a few everyday items could seriously damage a family's ability to live comfortably. Many apartment doors were surprisingly simple. Some were made from rough wood reinforced with metal fittings. Others relied on basic locking systems that offered only limited protection. Yet Romans invested heavily in locks whenever they could afford them. Archaeologists have discovered a remarkable variety of Roman keys, some small enough to wear as rings. These ring keys allowed owners to keep access to valuables literally on their fingers. Carrying a key openly also sent a message. There was something worth protecting. Leaving home for work created daily anxiety. Imagine a baker leaving before sunrise to prepare bread. A merchant spends hours in the market. A dock worker unloads ships along the river. Throughout the day, their apartments sit unattended. There are no security cameras, no alarm systems, and no neighbors guaranteed to help. Every hour away from home creates another opportunity for theft. Returning in the evening often involved a brief moment of tension, the fear that the door might be open. Inside many homes, valuable possessions were not left in plain sight. Romans hid money in boxes, jars, walls, and concealed compartments. Some buried coins beneath floors. Others stored wealth inside locked chests reinforced with iron bands. These chests served a role similar to modern safes. Opening one without permission required time and effort. A thief looking for quick profit often preferred easier targets. The stronger the lock, the greater the chance the criminal would move on to another victim. Trust was a complicated issue inside Roman households. Wealthier families often employed numerous slaves and servants. While many were loyal, Roman writers repeatedly warned about theft from within the home. Servants handled clothing, money, food, and household goods every day. Opportunities for small thefts existed everywhere. Missing coins, missing jewelry, missing silver cups, these complaints appear frequently in surviving Roman texts. Locks were not only protection against strangers. Sometimes they protected possessions from people living under the same roof. Apartment buildings created another problem: fire. Because residents feared devastating fires, many people rushed outside when smoke appeared. During these moments of confusion, thieves often took advantage of the chaos. A frightened family focused on escaping flames might leave possessions behind. Criminals understood this perfectly. Some reports suggest looters occasionally appeared almost immediately after emergencies began. In a city where disaster could strike without warning, securing valuables became part of emergency planning as much as crime prevention. Not all thieves worked alone. Organized groups sometimes targeted entire neighborhoods. One member observed residents and learned their routines. Another watched entrances and exits. Others carried stolen goods away. Such criminals preferred predictability. If a family left home at the same time every day, they became easier targets. Romans therefore varied routines whenever possible. Suspicion shaped behavior. People watched strangers carefully, questioned unfamiliar visitors, and paid close attention to anyone showing unusual interest in their homes. Even sleeping brought concerns about security. Many Romans kept valuables near their beds rather than elsewhere in the apartment. Important items remained within arm's reach during the night. Some homeowners placed furniture against doors for additional protection. Others relied on dogs to provide warning of intruders. While these measures could not guarantee safety, they offered peace of mind. In a crowded city filled with uncertainty, feeling secure for a few hours of sleep was worth considerable effort. By now it becomes clear that Roman locks were not symbols of luxury. They were tools of survival. Every locked chest, every hidden coin, every secured door reflected a deeper reality. Ordinary people lived in a city where opportunity and danger existed side by side. The same crowded streets that created wealth also created crime, yet the greatest threats were not always found at home. Beyond those apartment doors stood markets, taverns, bathhouses, and public spaces where thieves perfected their craft. And that is where our story goes next. Every morning, Rome's marketplaces exploded with activity. Merchants arrived carrying goods from every corner of the empire. Fresh vegetables, fish, olive oil, wine, cloth, and imported luxuries filled the crowded stalls. Thousands of buyers pushed through narrow spaces searching for bargains. To most people, the market was a place of commerce. To professional thieves, it was a hunting ground. Every distracted shopper represented an opportunity. Every crowded aisle provided cover. Every transaction created a brief moment when attention shifted away from personal belongings. A skilled Roman pickpocket rarely looked suspicious. He dressed like everyone else, moved like everyone else, and blended perfectly into the crowd. The most successful thieves understood human behavior. They watched hands, eyes, and body language. When a customer became focused on inspecting merchandise, bargaining with a vendor, or counting coins, the thief moved closer. A quick touch, a cut strap, a disappearing purse, and the criminal continued walking without breaking stride. Many victims never felt a thing. Some thieves preferred teamwork. One criminal accidentally bumped into a target. Another started an argument nearby. A third dropped an object onto the street. While the victim's attention shifted for only a few seconds, an accomplice removed valuables. These distractions seemed harmless in the moment. By the time the victim realized what had happened, the thieves were already far away. Such methods became so common that experienced Romans learned to view unexpected interactions with suspicion rather than friendliness. Public bathhouses created another paradise for criminals. Every day, thousands of Romans visited these enormous social centers. People came to exercise, relax, conduct business, and discuss politics. Before entering the baths, visitors removed their clothing and personal belongings. Those items were often left in changing areas or entrusted to attendants. This arrangement created obvious risks. A thief did not need to steal directly from a person's pocket. He simply waited until the owner entered the baths and then targeted unattended possessions. Roman writers frequently complained about theft in bathhouses. Clothing disappeared, sandals vanished, jewelry went missing, money pouches seemed to develop legs and walk away. Some visitors hired trusted attendants specifically to guard their belongings. Others carried only the bare minimum necessary for their visit. Wealthy citizens often brought slaves whose sole responsibility was watching valuable items. The popularity of these precautions reveals an uncomfortable truth. Bathhouse theft happened often enough for people to expect it. Taverns posed a different kind of danger. After a few cups of wine, judgment weakened and awareness faded. Criminals understood this perfectly. A tired traveler, a drunken laborer, or an overconfident merchant became easy targets. Sometimes thieves simply stole from distracted customers. Other times they gathered information. A careless conversation about money, business, or travel plans could attract unwanted attention. What seemed like a friendly stranger might actually be evaluating whether a robbery would be worthwhile. Festivals made the problem even worse. Rome celebrated countless public events throughout the year. Religious ceremonies, triumphal processions, gladiator games, and civic celebrations drew enormous crowds. Tens of thousands packed streets and public spaces. Noise filled the air, excitement distracted the senses. Under such conditions, maintaining awareness became nearly impossible. Criminals loved festivals because confusion protected them. A missing purse during a gathering of thousands could disappear forever without leaving a single useful clue. Travelers entering Rome faced particular risks. New arrivals often carried money, trade goods, or personal possessions accumulated during long journeys. Unfortunately, they also lacked local knowledge. Experienced criminals could identify outsiders quickly. Their clothing, accents, and behavior revealed unfamiliarity. Travelers were more likely to ask questions, become lost, or trust the wrong people. This made them attractive targets. Many visitors learned their first lesson about Rome not from a guide or merchant, but from discovering that something valuable had disappeared. What made these criminals especially dangerous was their adaptability. As Romans developed new ways to protect possessions, thieves developed new methods to bypass those protections. Better locks encouraged burglars to become more patient. Hidden money encouraged more thorough searches. Guarded belongings inspired more elaborate distractions. It became an endless contest between security and opportunity. In many ways, ancient Rome experienced the same struggle modern cities face today. Whenever valuable property exists, someone will attempt to take it. By the end of a typical day, countless thefts had occurred across the city. Some victims lost only a few coins, others lost goods worth months of income. Yet despite these risks, life continued. Markets remained crowded, bathhouses remained popular, festivals remained beloved. Romans could not avoid public life, they could only navigate its dangers. That constant balancing act explains why locks became so important. But there was one final reason Romans guarded their possessions so carefully. The consequences of losing them could be devastating. In the next chapter, we will discover how theft affected daily survival and why security became woven into the very culture of ancient Rome. For a wealthy Roman senator, losing a purse might be irritating. For an ordinary laborer, it could be catastrophic. Many citizens lived close to the edge of poverty. Their savings were small, their wages modest, and their expenses constant. A stolen week's earnings might mean less food for the family. A stolen cloak could make winter far more difficult. A stolen set of tools could prevent someone from earning money altogether. In ancient Rome, theft was not always an inconvenience. Sometimes it threatened survival itself. Consider the life of a craftsman. Every day he depended on specialized tools to earn a living. A carpenter needed saws and chisels. A blacksmith required hammers and metalworking equipment. A merchant relied on scales and containers. These items represented significant investments. If thieves stole them, replacing them could take months. Unlike modern workers who might find alternatives quickly, many Romans depended entirely on the possessions they owned. Protecting those possessions became just as important as protecting their homes. This reality shaped Roman behavior from childhood. Parents taught children to guard belongings carefully. Young Romans learned not to leave possessions unattended. They learned to distrust unfamiliar promises and remain alert in crowded places. Security was not a special lesson taught during emergencies. It was woven in everyday life. By the time children became adults, many had already witnessed theft personally, either as victims or as observers. The experience reinforced a simple rule. Carelessness carried consequences. Roman locksmiths benefited from this culture of caution. As demand for security increased, craftsmen developed increasingly sophisticated locks and keys. Some mechanisms were surprisingly advanced for their time. Metal components, sliding bolts, hidden catches, and carefully designed keyholes made unauthorized entry more difficult. Wealthy homeowners often invested heavily in these devices. Possessing a strong lock demonstrated more than wealth. It demonstrated awareness of the dangers that surrounded urban life in the empire's largest city. One of the most fascinating Roman inventions was the ring key. Instead of carrying a large key separately, some Romans wore miniature keys on their fingers. At first glance, these objects resembled ordinary rings. In reality, they provided access to locked boxes and storage containers. The design was practical. A key attached to a hand was harder to lose and harder for thieves to steal. It also reflected how frequently Romans interacted with locks. Security accompanied them wherever they went. Archaeological discoveries reveal just how common these precautions became. Excavations across former Roman territories have uncovered countless locks, keys, bolts, hinges, and security devices. They appear in military forts, private homes, shops, warehouses, and public buildings. This widespread evidence tells a clear story. The desire to protect property was not limited to Rome itself. Throughout the empire, people invested time and money into keeping possessions secure. The concern was universal because the threat was universal. Yet no lock offered perfect protection. Determined thieves always searched for weaknesses. Some forced doors open, others exploited human error. An unlocked window, a forgotten key, a distracted servant, any mistake could become an opportunity. This is why Roman security depended on habits as much as hardware. A lock was useful only if someone remembered to use it. Vigilance remained essential. In many ways, the most important security system in ancient Rome was not a device. It was human caution. As the centuries passed, Rome continued to grow, attracting merchants, migrants, travelers, and fortune seekers from across the empire. Greater population brought greater prosperity, but it also increased anonymity. People no longer knew everyone living nearby. Strangers became a normal part of urban life. This made trust more complicated than in smaller communities. Locks provided reassurance in a world where personal relationships could not guarantee safety. Metal and wood often seemed more reliable than unfamiliar neighbors. The irony is impossible to ignore. Ancient Rome was one of history's most powerful civilizations. Its armies conquered vast territories. Its engineers built roads, aqueducts, and monuments that still inspire admiration today. Yet ordinary Romans worried about many of the same things people worry about now. They feared losing money. They feared burglary. They feared walking through dangerous neighborhoods after dark. Beneath the grandeur of the empire existed everyday concerns that felt surprisingly modern. So why did ancient Romans lock everything they owned? The answer goes far beyond simple crime. They lived in a city of immense crowds, constant movement, economic inequality, and endless opportunity for theft. Markets, bathhouses, taverns, apartment buildings, and even private homes presented risks. Every lock, every hidden coin, every secured chest reflected hard-earned experience. Romans understood a truth that remains relevant today. Wealth means little if you cannot protect it. In the greatest city of the ancient world, security was not a luxury. It was a necessity, and for countless Romans, it was the difference between stability and disaster.